welcome back to Kitsune's Tale. Please like, subscribe, and comment as we forge more chapters for your enjoyment.
Chapter 11. Blood Moon. Even at this late hour, the village was alive with activity. I could hear the bustle of life and laughter everywhere. The elder approached once she noticed me walking with Shero. "It is good to see you, honored Kitsune. We have prepared a great celebration to welcome you and your friends." I blinked in astonishment. "Please call me Kara. What is your name, honored elder?" The elder bowed hurriedly. "Many apologies, Lady Kara. My name is Seriana." Seriana led us into the center of the village where a small stand had been erected while I slept. "A great many followers have come to see you, lady. Even the Kitsune monks have graced us this night." I froze at the mention of the visiting Kitsune. Seriana blinked at me nervously. "What is it, Lady Kara? Does something bother you?" "I am sorry, Elder Seriana. I have not had a good history with other Kitsune," I explained. "Every Kitsune I have met since leaving the Alliance has tried to kill me." Concern filled Seriana's face. The elder waved one of the village warriors over and whispered something briefly into his ear before he ran off in the direction of the platform. "This is serious news, Lady Kara. We were not aware of such acts until now. I have sent for guards to be ready when you meet with the monks. All will be well." I reluctantly followed Seriana to the waiting crowd of Hulijing and Kitsune. I was all too aware of every eye watching me cross to the steps of the raised platform. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught sight of Shero and Corsa waiting, hands resting on their weapons. Seriana led me up the stairs to present me to the gathered people. I stood nervously while the elder introduced me to the crowd of fox-like people in various forms. When she was finished, all but the Kitsune cheered in response. The Kitsune waited quietly for me to speak, their expressions unreadable. I drew my power around me like a shroud, just in case any of them decided they would rather see me dead than be seen as an idol to the assembled Hulijing. It was then that Fei-shan appeared like a solidifying mist beside me. His sudden appearance caused the gathered Kitsune to step back as one, several bowing, some cowering, but all were scared. He stood like an ominous omen to all who had gathered. "I have come to legitimize Kara Greywood as the heir to Lady Kayla Greywood," he announced. "Let it be known that she is my speaker, and that should any harm befall her, I shall descend upon the world as a vengeful spirit." Each Kitsune went to one knee, their heads bowed and fists planted firmly in the ground in a show of submission. None rose until told to do so by Fei-shan. Fei-shan leaned over to whisper into my ear, "They await a display of your power." I stared wide-eyed at him. "I don't know what to do. I'm no leader," I whispered back in a panicked voice. Fei-shan smiled the wickedest smile I had ever seen. He changed instantly from a seductive fox to a demon born of nightmares. "You are more powerful than any save me," he growled. "As my heir, you can show no weakness." I stood stricken with fear. Despite his deceptive charm and personality, Fei-shan was feared by all his followers. For the first time, I understood why. I could feel the power radiating off him like static. Despite my fear, I stood my ground. "I am not you. I will never allow others to worship me to boost my own ego." I turned my attention to the gathered crowd. "Just as each of you served the memory of my grandmother, I now serve you as she once did." I bowed to the onlookers. I was rewarded with cheering and the chanting of my family name. The Kitsune stood in unison and bowed reverently. I descended the platform, followed closely by Shero and Corsa. Shero walked proudly next to me. "Your grandmother would be proud of you today. I think it is time you learned court manners and intrigue, though. I have a feeling you will need all I can teach you." We were intercepted by one of the Kitsune monks. He was not much taller than me, and I thought he was not much older. However, I had been wrong in the past. "Honored Greywood, High Priestess Roshi has asked me to request your presence." The young Kitsune's 3 tails dangled limply behind him. It took me several moments to register what he had said. I was completely lost in his ice-blue eyes, set within a background of thick white and gray fur. I found that words escaped me, so I simply gestured for him to lead. Shero and I followed the young Kitsune to rows upon rows of vines suspended from interlocking trellises. Inspecting the heavy burden of fruit was an elderly Kitsune leaning heavily on her cane. Her graying black hands ran gently over the grapes, pulling on the green vines. She stood slowly at the sound of our approach, using her cane to assist her. Unlike the three-tail who had been sent to extend her invitation, Roshi's eyes were dark amber with a stare that could melt even the coldest of ice. Her reddish fur had thinned over the years and was almost washed away in a sea of gray. Roshi limped over to meet me at the edge of the vineyard. "It is good to see a descendant of old Greywood. My apologies if I do not bow, but my body is not as it once was." I smiled at the old Kitsune and bowed respectfully. "It is I who should bow to the wisdom of my elders." Roshi smiled in return. "You are wise beyond your years, Seven Tails. Would you be so kind as to walk with me for a time?" The elder extended an arm which I took in my own. She ambled slowly down the aisle of vines with me and my Lowenfrau guards trailing behind. "What brings you across the veil, young one? It was my understanding Kayla would not return unless she brought about prophecy." "My grandmother died many years back. She told me of many adventures, but she did not send me nor tell me of this world." I retold the story I had shared with my friends of how I came to be in the new world. "I never knew of this place until I met Lord Kano." "Even so, you have ventured down the path of prophecy unwittingly." Roshi stopped to study me more closely. "I can't say that I am sorry. You have breathed new life into a dying race. Without the blood of the human world to mix with that of our own or the Hulijing, fewer Kitsune are born every year." "But how am I supposed to help the Kitsune? I am not my grandmother, nor am I wise or powerful." Roshi patted my shoulder just as I remembered my grandmother doing when she would encourage me. "You are your grandmother in many ways, child, but you are more powerful than you know." My look was doubtful. "Never doubt yourself, child. No other has achieved the status of a great one in thousands of years, yet here you stand with your 7 tails. Only through wisdom and power could you achieve such a feat." I shook my head in denial. "I am far from wise, elder. I still have much to learn about myself and the world around me." Roshi smiled once more. "Even now you display much wisdom in your answer. It takes great strength to admit that you are still ignorant of many things, child." The white-furred Kitsune appeared from his hiding place within the vines to take charge of the elder Kitsune. "Go now. Enjoy the celebration before you are missed." I returned to the celebration now in full swing. I dismissed my friends, giving thanks for their vigilance before seeking out Shero, who had returned some time ago. I found the old fox engaged in a heated discussion with the village elder. "I do not care what you think of the blood moon. My granddaughter will not be part of them." Seriana stood with her arms crossed defensively. "That is not your decision. It is up to Kara if she wants to take part in the rite." I stood out of view of the arguing Hulijing elders. The heated dispute continued until I finally grew tired of listening to others trying to plan out my life. I resented the fact that even here, my life was not my own. I walked along until I was well out of sight of the village and sat upon a rock overlooking the valley farther down. Overhead, the twin moons rose high into the night sky, illuminating the valley floor. I watched as the wind created waves of color and light to lap against the distant tree line. I listened to the world around me. Ever since my last trial, I had become aware of so much more. Even out of sight of the village, I could still hear the chatter of voices when the wind shifted in my direction. The smell of smoke and cooked meat assaulted my nose before being carried away on the wind when it would shift in another direction. I longed to see my grandmother, to ask her what to do. She always knew what to do, the right things to say. The world was rapidly closing in on me. In that moment, I longed to return to a simpler time when my only concern was dealing with the bullies at school. But that path seemed closed to me now. Would I ever see my mother or human friends again? I continued to watch the night sky until I was disturbed by the snow-white Kitsune who walked up to sit beside me. I said nothing, choosing to ignore his presence in the hopes he would eventually leave. That hope was soon crushed when he lay back on the rock with a sigh. Roshi says you are the one to lead us to our ancestral home. Is this true? When I did not answer, he pressed on. My name is Shero. Again, nothing. I hope to one day gain my fourth tail, but the monks tell me that it is a long time in coming. Maybe I will be as great as you one day? Finally, I spoke. There is no greatness in being faced with terror unlike you have never experienced. I nearly died during the trials for my first 4 tails. I faced Fei Shan to gain my 5th. I glared at him scornfully. I nearly died again, saving a friend to gain my 6th. To gain my 7th, a close friend died, and I nearly did as well. I have come close to death so many times that I still have trouble coming to terms with it. I stood suddenly and walked to the edge of a nearby cliff. Shero walked up to stand beside me. I continued talking without ever looking at him again. I have lost so much that I am not sure the price I paid is worth the reward. Even now, I find myself contemplating my own life and how important it really is. Without warning, I stepped off the edge. Shero lunged to grab me but fell short. He lay sprawled with his arms outstretched toward me. I floated in the air, churning under me. Even now, my power refuses to release me. I stepped carefully back onto the ledge. I feel it growing in me even as we speak. The power over the basic elements of life surrounds me like a cocoon. Even should I wish, I do not think I could ever escape them. Shero pushed himself up onto his knees. Why would you ever wish to be free of your power? It is the dream of every Kitsune to achieve what you have made reality. I once again turned my attention back to the night sky. There was a time not so long ago when my only concerns were with my own petty wants, when I had nothing to worry me beyond the few bullies that haunted me at my school. I thought then that I would rather be anywhere but there, and now I am not so sure. It was so much easier then. Lives were not lost or changed because of me. I never turned my attention back to the young Shero after that. To my relief, he said nothing more and finally left. I was once again alone with my thoughts. I had not expected the wind to carry me as it had onto the cliff, and now wondered about truth of my words. Fei Shan had told me that with each tale my life would be extended until I would eventually become like him, near immortal. I sighed heavily and turned back toward the village. I had only gotten a step when I noticed another Kitsune standing before me. This one was different than any other I had met thus far. For one, the Kitsune had 5 tails and peered at me over a pair of glasses. The burden of not only the Kitsune but the whole world has always been placed on the Greywood shoulders. You are the one strong enough to do what needs to be done. Only you can ensure the continuation of life for all those in this world, for their time here grows short. A gust of wind blew past me to carry away the Kitsune like smoke. Before I could ask anything of the Kitsune, she was gone. I stood frozen in time, unable to move. I was not entirely sure that the image of the Kitsune was real or some trick played on me by Fei Shan. The Nine-Tail was adamant that I continue on my quest to gain equal status for whatever his true reasons may be. I was sure it was more than the need for someone to share his existence with. The sun was beginning to rise by the time I returned to the village, yet the celebration showed no signs of ending anytime soon. My mind was still awash with my conversation with the white Kitsune and the strange spirit. I found my way back to the estate and made my way to my pool to relax and attempt to wash away my worries. I shed my robe along with my Kitsune body before sliding into the steaming water. The one thing I loved most about my abilities was the infinite supply of hot water. Despite my best efforts, my mind kept floating back to the spirit on the mountain ridge. I did not understand what it meant by the burden of the world falling on my shoulders. Could it have something to do with the prophecy everyone keeps talking about? I considered the question. The prophecy was still a mystery to me. And what was it about Shero that intrigued me so? I found myself remembering his ice-blue stare with vivid clarity. Somehow I felt drawn to the young Kitsune. But how old is he really? I soaked in the water until my skin began to shrivel and turn white. With a sigh of regret, I climbed out of the water and rummaged around in the clean pile of pants and shirts that had appeared in my absence. I was surprised to find the sole surviving pair of pants I had arrived with cleaned and repaired. I studied the worn pair of tan cargo pants before making up my mind to search for a tailor to reproduce several more. I grabbed a pair of brown riding breeches and a matching sleeveless shirt. I walked through the busy streets searching for a suitable vendor. Most were of the standard colorful robes favored by the Jing and Kitsune alike, but after searching for much of the morning, I finally found what I was looking for. The proprietor examined the cargoes skeptically. He eventually asked me to wait. When he returned, he was accompanied by who I assumed was his mother. She questioned me at length about the modifications she would have to make, considering the snaps were unknown to her. In the end, they agreed on the use of buttons to replace the foreign snaps. I left with the promise that 6 new pairs would be available within the week, along with more of the sleeveless shirts to match. Lacking anything constructive to do, I decided on exploring the other shops scattered throughout the village. After inquiring with a couple of vendors, I was directed to a forge belonging to Kreshmir, who was the son of the village elder. I found the middle-aged Jing hammering at a piece of steel in his forge. Not wishing to disturb him while he worked, I contented myself to watch, remembering the time I spent with Kitsune. Kreshmir wore only a simple apron along with a pair of simple pants. His muscles bulged under the weight of his heavy hammer. When he slid the metal back into the oven, I took the opportunity to knock on one of the metal breastplates lying out on the table. "Excuse me, Master Kreshmir, do you have a minute?" Kreshmir jerked his head up to look at me before crossing the room and bowed. "I always have time for you, Lady Greywood. How may I be of assistance?" I bowed in return to the master armorer. "I was wondering if you might have a sword available for purchase. I am in need of one for practice." "But of course, Lady Greywood." Kreshmir examined me briefly before retrieving a long, slim blade from a pile at the back of his shop. "This will do nicely for practice, but you will need one more suited to you for any practical use." I accepted the sword, thankfully. "I only need one for practice. I am not ready for one of my own. How much for the practice blade?" Kreshmir waved a hand dismissively. "It is yours." Unable to simply take the sword, I dug out 3 coppers and laid them on the table. "For the cost of the metal, then, if not your services." Kreshmir bowed, and with a practiced hand, he swept away the coins. I ran the blade through a series of moves I had seen Kern teaching his students. It was not the greatest blade I had ever seen, and was a bit off balance, but for my uses, it would suffice. "Do you have a practice dummy?" The smith led me to the back of the armory where other Jing were practicing with both bow and blade. I found an unused practice disc suspended from 2 poles by thick strands of braided rope. I took careful aim before settling into the stance Kitsune had shown me. The disc let out a dull thud with each strike. I quickly grew bored with the simple motions I had been taught and decided to attempt some of the more advanced moves I had seen Kern's students perform. My thrusts and slashes were clumsy, and most of my strikes glanced harmlessly off the wooden disc to my dismay. After a few more attempts, I grew angry at my lack of skill and stormed out of the practice field. The longer I walked, the more frustrated I became until I could not take it any longer and threw the sword at a nearby tree. The moment I saw the tree, my vision narrowed until nothing existed except for my target. I used all my strength to throw the sword end over end. My vision returned to normal the moment the sword left my hand, and I watched as it sunk hilt deep into the hard wood. "Congratulations." I turned to see Shero standing behind me. "I bet that tree will never mess with you now." The Kitsune stood with his hands on his hips, watching me mockingly. "What do you want?" I am not in the mood right now, I said angrily. Shero strode over to where the sword had stuck deep into the tree and pulled it free with a grunt of effort. I saw you at the practice field. Your form is sloppy and careless. He returned the sword to me hilt first. I considered offering to teach you what I know, but it is obvious you do not wish to learn. Shero turned and walked away, ignoring the returning retort. Lacking a target, I released my rising power into the sword. The weapon turned brown and brittle before dissolving into dust. I absently let the rust run between my fingers like sand as I watched Shero's retreating figure. I growled in frustration before storming off through the village. I eventually lost my steam and resorted to dragging my feet as I walked through the packed dirt market. Soon after, a small stone became the focus of my attention as I kicked it along ahead of me. A short time later, I came to the edge of the village marked by a line of grass and trees. I glanced over my shoulder to ensure nobody was watching me, then headed out across the small field toward a thick forest at the base of the mountain. I continued my journey deeper into the thickening forest until the canopy of leaves began to block out all but the smallest rays of light. Around me, I could hear the sound of birds chirping overhead, along with the rustle of dead leaves as a small animal moved hidden across the forest floor. I spotted what I thought was a deer in the distance weaving its way through the underbrush. Curiously, I followed the animal at a respectable distance to see where it might go. My curiosity led me deeper into the darker, quieter depths of the forest. Even the rays of light were unable to penetrate where I treaded. I stopped to take stock of my surroundings to discover I was now completely lost. The deer I had been following was long gone now, having dissolved into the thicket like a ghost. I wondered absently why every creature I met seemed to vanish like a ghost, or a wisp of smoke as I wandered around the forest for what seemed an eternity, unable to retrace my steps back to the village. Something among a tangle of vines caught my attention. I cautiously crept closer to investigate. The object of my attention turned out to be a stone statue of some sort, mostly hidden beneath the table of vines growing up around it. I pulled at pieces of new growth now, wishing I had not destroyed my sword in a bout of anger. It took forever to pull the vines free enough to get a better picture of the statue concealed underneath. What I found was the crumbling remains of a Kitsune statue. It had lost most of its tails over the years, and they now lay broken on the ground behind it. Only 2 of the indiscernible number of tails remained of the once proud statue. It stood crouched with both arms held before a snarling face.
Thank you for joining us for another edition of A Kitsune's Tale. We hope you will return for more.